Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Inshallah, you're all well. Halima here, your Quran lifestyle coach. I have some good news for you all today, which is that I am going to be joined by a very special guest and we're going to have a very fruitful conversation. We're going to be joined by his brother Qasim Rafiq. Today, we're going to be finding out a little bit about him and the amazing work that he does, a little bit about his personal journey as well. And we're hoping to gain some wisdom, inshallah, in terms of relationships specifically and how we can better and improve them, both for what's remaining of Ramadan, what's remaining of the lockdown, and far beyond that as well, inshallah. So I just wanted to start by saying Jazakallah khairan for taking the time to speak with us today and to share your wisdom and experience with us. We're very honored to have you part of the Quran Rehab community today.
Alhamdulillah. The wisdom is actually in your department. Masha, you've been doing this for a long time.
Oh, Jazakallah khair. No, I mean, I've been following you for a number of years now, alhamdulillah. Really admire the work that you do. I think it's so important to the opportunity to be able to do this interview and have this fruitful discussion. It was one that I was looking forward to, alhamdulillah. I just wanted to begin by telling our audience members, because some people of this community maybe are not familiar with yourself and the fantastic work that you do. So I just wanted to briefly just introduce you.
Sure.
Brother Qasim Rafiq, he is a relationship expert and he's a certified coach as well and an author. He was actually born in the UK, but as you can hear, he's a fellow Scotsman from his accent, mashallah. And his background is basically in nutrition and psychology. And he's also a certified NLP and a CBT practitioner. And he actually trained at Gottman Institute in Seattle. And mashallah, he's had quite the history career as well. He's worked as part of the International Ocean Rescue Team. And he's also served as a police officer as well, interestingly, in Scotland for 7 years. And now he works in the field of personal development. And he studied under a lot of the greats like Anthony Robbins and Brendan Burchard and Muhammad Sharif, mashallah, tabarakallah. And now he's specializing specifically in relationship coaching. So if I can just start, Brother Qasim, now we're going to talk a bit about the current work that you do as a relationship coach. But just on reflection of all of your career before that, like we said, you had quite a varied, job history, mashallah. But the commonality in all of those kind of job roles is the fact that they revolve around service to other people. So can I just ask you, was this something that you were conscious of at a young age, or was it something that you were kind of just drawn to these kind of these types of careers as you were exploring your career paths? Could you maybe tell us a little bit about how your work history kind of developed to take you where you are today as a relationship coach?
Sure. I guess the term empath was something that I sort of like realized further on down the timeline of my journey, as they say. But I've always been geared towards service-related initiatives, whether that's voluntary work. I went out to Africa, did some stuff in Africa for work, and at the same time, while I was there for work, I was going to as many schools as possible, trying to help out with the local kids when I was there. Sure. This is way back. So I've always been drawn to sort of like that side of things. And I think what it is when I was younger, I used to think the best way forward would be to get involved with some form of rescue work. And as you mentioned before, so I put a lot of my initiative and my efforts into that sort of thinking, this is the way I want to move forward, to do something to do with either being a paramedic or some form of sort of like mountain rescue, ocean rescue. This is years ago when I was like maybe 17, 18. So really, whenever I got myself involved with that side of things, I had a great fulfillment. I mean, I can tell you lots of stories about times where I've actually, within these sort of like job remits, I've actually helped lives, I've saved lives, and the feeling that you get from that, it's unbelievable. And even my stint in the police for 7 years, the things that I witnessed, the things that I had to deal with, I'm talking back in 1999 when I joined the police. And so back then as well, especially in Scotland, there was hardly any Asian or ethnic minority officers at that time. So for me, it was like it was a new experience, and the things I got to see, deal with were, to be honest, life-changing. And a lot of the stuff I've mentioned in some of the books that I've written and a lot of my writings.
No, subhanAllah. And, in terms of how that led to you moving into the career of coaching, how did that kind of transition happen?
Well, actually, we have to take a step back, because really all of that started back in, I think, 2008, where I actually realized I want to go and do something where it comes to understanding the human condition. And so I was going through a very dark period of my life back in like the mid to 2000 range. And so I had to sort of like find myself, and a lot of soul searching. And but we can talk about the Everest thing, because I know that was part of the title of your poster. But that Everest thing, sort of that expedition was a huge turnaround for me. There was a lot of lessons learnt. And from there onwards, I realised like I need to be dealing with people. And one of the reasons, to be honest, I left the place as well was, I'll give you a funny story, was that in the place we were out there in sort of like in our districts, enforcing the law and doing whatever we had to do, and arresting people was obviously part of the remit. But I would always find myself after making an arrest. So I've got the cuffs on a person. We're in the van, going back to go to the charge bar to get him charged. But I'll find myself always speaking to the individual, like a real deep one-to-one conversation with him, and asking him like, but why? You're asking her why, and sort of like trying to figure them out. Until one day, one of the sergeants took me to the side, and literally, he never gave me a slap on the wrist, but he just said to me, look, you're here to jail them, son. Not counsel them. And I realised then, I said, I can't see myself doing this till retirement. So I realised that there was something else. There was a calling for me to do something else.
SubhanAllah, that's really interesting. And going back to the Mount Everest that you mentioned, it was something that really stood out when I read your story. So I just wanted to ask you, what made you want to go on that British expedition that you did? And I'm sure there were many, many takeaways that you had from that experience, but to share with our audience, what was kind of the biggest takeaways as well that you got from that journey of yours?
Okay. Well, let's start from the beginning then. If we're going to touch upon Everest, really Everest happened, for me, obviously the climb was in 2008, but for me it actually happened in 2001 when my mother passed away. And the reason I put them both together is because when she passed away suddenly, she was only 43, I think, at the time. So she was so young, and she got prayed Fajr. Then after Fajr, she went back to sleep and never woke up. And that in itself was something that was very traumatic. But for me, the reason that Everest came around was because, now if we take a step back from there, during the ocean rescue time and all this sort of like service towards trying to help people, and not only help people, but to the extreme of actually saving lives. I was trained in not just first aid, but ocean aquatic rescue. I was also sort of like advanced first aid and like knowing how to use a defib machine. And like, so I'd gone through quite a lot of stages. And then that day when I was like, my father sort of like he basically shouted me in, saying in the early hours of the morning that, son, come. And something's wrong with your mum. And when I went into that situation, and obviously you have that panic mode, but then I went into that mode of rescue, and I'm like, okay. So I did whatever I had to do from my training, but what ended up happening was like, it wasn't enough. At that time, this is what I was thinking in my mind, and years later, and this is where the Everest thing will come in. She passed away, and I did everything that I thought you're supposed to do with the techniques, the CPR, everything. But she never made it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on her soul. But that situation there was actually the thing that caused me to go in a completely, I guess you can say, in a completely different trajectory. And I've mentioned in my book, and I've obviously written a book regarding my first actual writing was something I did way back called 7 Life Lessons on Overcoming Your Past Self. And that was something that actually took a lot of notes while climbing, believe it or not. And these were just notes that I took trying to figure myself out. And I realized by studying the human condition, starting to get really involved with understanding the scholastic position from a faith-based perspective. And then obviously from some of the sort of like great figures in our era, like you mentioned, like Tony Robbins, Brendan Burchard, try to sort of like fuse them together and understand me and why I was doing what I was doing in my years. I caused a lot of damage, and I hurt a lot of people. I hurt myself. And as I've explained in my book, this is not my first marriage. I've had failed marriages, but yet at the same time, that's what I used to think back then. But they're not for me now. They were actually just life lessons. And the reality now is that I realised that back then, this trajectory that it took me on, I realised that I was blaming myself for years without actually facing up to it. For a long time, I can't remember the exact number of years, but for a long time, I went down this tangent of really being reckless in the sense that just reckless with making poor decisions, poor choices. But then when I spoke to a lot of people of knowledge, I spoke to people who are involved in the psychology remit in that sense, I started to realise that I had to do a timeline on myself. And at that time, I was training in NLP, and I realised that I'm doing timelines on everyone else. Why not do a timeline on myself? So I did that, and I traced it right back to 2001. And I realised that I was literally blaming myself for having the skill set and thinking that, you know something, I started for years deep down saying, if I just did this technique like this, if I just tilted the head slightly more, if I just did the compressions in this way, then I started realising, oh no, I started doing CPR while she was on the bed. I should have taken her off the bed, because when you're doing compressions, it's because of the mattress. So all these things, but because of the panic, because remember, I've done CPR before on folk. I've helped children that have been drowning. I've helped adults that have been sort of like stuck in really serious situations. But I realised like what was meant to be is what was meant to be. And one of the most comforting, I guess, pieces of advice I got was from a sheikh called Sheikh Salman Al-Auda, who's a very famous sheikh, and he's going through a lot of his own personal trials. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise his rank in this life and the next life. But back in, I think it was 2008, 2009, I can't remember the exact year, but he came over to the UK to do something that in the UK they have Islam Channel. I don't know if they're still running or not, but they did this massive global peace conference, which was like really unique at the time, back in the mid-2000s. And so what happened was they had all these distinguished and esteemed guests come from all over the world, and he was one of them. And I had a very dear colleague of mine who I was with in London, and we went, and they had connections. So I managed to sit with this sheikh and speak to him about a lot of my issues and this anguish that I had. And he gave me some really amazing pieces of advice. And one of them regarding, there was many bits of advice that sort of like plotted in all my sort of like life situations. But the advice that he gave me for that aspect of what happened to my mum, he said very simply, he said, even if you were the most trained was a heart specialist at that moment, when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. When you're in your mother's womb, it's already decreed for you, your lifespan, your risk, your provision, your health, whether you're going to be of a person of goodness and whether you're going to be a person of dignity and rank. And all of this is done when you're in your mum's womb. So for me, I guess I realised like from there on, I was I was kind of like going and being very reckless in a lot of my decision making. But the reality was I was trying to fill a void. I was trying to fill this void that was this gash, this huge gash that was left. And I was looking for validation. I was looking for acknowledgement from people to be able to fill that space of my mum. So the thing was that obviously I realised, I came to sort of like terms. The pain was still there, and it's still to this day. I mean, I could be I can be sitting and I was seeing a mother and a son walking by, and for some reason I burst out and start sort of like tearing up, and it's just, you have these moments, but the reality is they will always be there with you. But the reality is that I came to terms with the reality that I can't blame myself for not being able to, like, whoever I've saved in the past, they were meant to have been saved. And that's the thing is, and and something that actually made me reflect upon my ocean rescue years was this. I was once involved where we got called out to a serious rescue situation where we had to travel out in a scarab. A scarab is a kind of like a speedboat with our gear. Like basically the chief at the time, the chief lifeguard at the time, basically called over the radio, said, we need to get out to this point in this position. There has been there's a situation where there's a boat sinking. That's all information that we had, and they were quite far out. So we had to take the scarab. We went out, grabbed our boys, grabbed the radios. We were out there. But as we were going out, as we got closer and closer to the scene, I realised that there was kids like that were like, there was a ship there, a larger ship there. There was no one in the water, but there was a lot of kids on this boat, this larger boat. And then when we got there, we were completely confused because we were thinking, hold on, there's a boat sinking and there's a lot of crying children on this boat, but there's no boat sinking. And what ended up happening was, and this is actually, it's very deep. What ended up happening was that when we got there, there was a teacher who took a fiberglass boat out with the school children. He had about between 14 and 18 children on that boat. But what ended up happening was that he went out quite far and there was some problem. There must have been a leak. Obviously, the boat was damaged, so it was taking on water. He never had life jackets on. This is out in the Seychelles, by the way. This is an island just outside, about 1,000 miles east of Kenya, off the east coast of Africa, sorry. So, I mean, the lifeguards there are all from like South Africa and Australia. They're trained, they all know what they're doing. But the thing is, like, even the local Seychelles people, they'll go out, they don't have the facilities that we do have, like in Australia or the US. They don't just have life jackets everywhere. So all these children went out without life jackets. And the teacher obviously went out without a life jacket. And they were because they're just used to doing that, because it's just the way of their island life. And what ended up happening was, like, when the boat started submerging, and listen to the qadr of Allah, when the boat started sinking, all the children, they were aged between 5 and 8. They were just going out for like a tour on this boat. When they started sinking, the children panicked and it all piled up on the teacher. And this teacher was a grown, fit, healthy man. And these children, a lot of them couldn't even swim. Yeah. So between 5 and 8 years old, they're all piled on the teacher. And what ended up happening was, like, this boat, with Allah's mercy, this other tourist boat was coming with Germans on it, like a German tourist boat. And the German tourists saw these kids all in the water by that stage, clinging onto the teacher. And so they dive in, they collect the children one by, like, the tourists are jumping in, getting the kids out, but by that stage the teacher drowned.
Subhanallah.
So the teacher drowned, and not one child. This teacher was a professional. He was a good swimmer, from what we were told by his family. He knows the sea. He's got a lot of experience in the sea. But the thing is that he drowned that day, and all these children survived. And that's the thing is, and I can recall we had to wait there because I was thinking, do we have to put our tank in? Do we have to go down? Do we have to get in? But anyway, we got like the actual the folks above us with the scooper gear and stuff, they came in, they collected the body, but we took the body on our boat. So I was sitting there on this boat with this teacher, and I still remember the look on his face. This person's clearly, he's passed away, but the look on his face. And I sat there and I took him back to shore with my colleague, and we got him, obviously, got trapped, there was ambulance there, we took him off, and then all of a sudden, all these incidents that happened in my life during the rescue work started to make sense because of what the chef told me. That the reality is that what's for you won't go by you. If it's your time, it'll be your time. These children all survived, and the teacher drowned. And so then I realised, and I put it into context for myself regarding my mum, and I said, no matter what happens, we all did our best. We tried our best. I tried my best. And the thing is that at the end of the day, I cannot hold myself accountable. And from that day onwards, I just had a completely different trajectory then. And then the Everest thing came about where I, in honour, I guess, of my mum, and at the same time I was going through some really personal, I think I was going through a lot of hardship in my time back at that stage. I went and I was with a friend in the hospital, and I was with my friend because he'd injured himself, and we were there, and I just saw this poster, and I was like there, it was a really low point in my life, and there was a lot going on in my personal life, and then I looked at this poster, and it was by the British Heart Foundation, and I just saw British Heart Foundation. I looked at Everest, and it took me back to when I was like 10, 11 years old. I used to have this poster of Everest right in front of me for years, and as a kid growing up, I was saying to myself, I'm going to climb that one day, I'm going to climb that one day. And then what ended up happening was that when I saw this poster, it was almost like a calling, and it's strange to say, and I can't explain the feeling, but it's almost like everything else darkened out, and everything, that my entire focus was on this poster. And I said to myself, within that moment, I said to myself, I'm going to go climb Everest. And at the same time, because there was a cause that my mum passed away of, it was like a heart condition, I said, this is the way forward. And that's what I did, and Everest was challenging, extremely challenging. There was a lot to it. I did a lot of soul searching, and during my climb, it was 3 weeks. It was getting up to, just base camp itself is like, it took us like 3 weeks or something, and so it's like 5,400 meters. It was intense. It was a lot of hard work, getting used to battling like 4 to 8 hours of trekking every single day, and then battling acclimatization, because obviously I'm sure you know this, but a lot of the biggest difficulties for climbers or people trekking, especially in the Himalayas, is the altitude sickness. And that's where people don't, because it's a physiological thing. You don't know if your body can handle acclimatization or not until you start getting to these heights. And so there was that, battling that. A lot of my friends couldn't make it. Like in the team, obviously we had a big team of it, and a lot of them couldn't make it. Once they got to like a certain height, they were like going back. One of my friends caught a severe fever. He had to get airlifted off at like 2,000 meters, I think it was. One of my close friends I did all my training with, a really lovely Muslim brother, his name was Amar. We went out together as the only 2 Muslims in this entire expedition of like 30 people. And when we got to a certain level, he came down with acute mountain sickness, and so he couldn't make it either. So, and at one stage I was thinking, oh my God, because one of the signs of mountain sickness is when your brain starts to swell. And one of the signs of that is when you start getting, that's why a lot of people take Dimox and stuff, like for the altitude. But one of the I had one day, I can't remember exactly where I'd reached. I've got it in my diary somewhere that I had from Everest. I reached a point I started getting severe migraines, and my body wasn't adjusting and wasn't getting acclimatized. I was going too fast up the mountain and not allowing myself to acclimatize. So I spoke to obviously the folks in charge, and they were telling me just to rest, just to stay at this altitude until my blood oxygen level sort of like balances out and I get used to the altitude. But alhamdulillah, the next morning, the Sherpas, who were like the guides taking up at Everest, they made me some yak tea, which is like, it's an amazing tea that they make with fresh yak butter. And I felt a lot better. And then I made it all the way and we got up to base camp at that time. And it was worth it. And I sort of like did a lot of soul searching, like I said, in between them nights, up a lot of nights when everyone was sleeping with a frozen beard at that time, trying to figure my life out and take a lot of notes and really do a lot of soul searching. And then I came, and then after that I realised like I have to completely change the paradigm of my life. And it wasn't an overnight fix. I still made a lot of poor decisions, but obviously something that you've been doing for such a long time, you have to get your body adjusted, you have to realise who you are as an individual. And this is where some of these great mentors like Sheikh Mohammed Al-Sharif, who's the founder of Discover You and Al-Maghrib Institute, he did some amazing courses like Visionaire and Red Pill and all these. And he was my first introduction into then meeting and doing courses with Brendan Burchard and then obviously Tony Robbins. That's
really interesting because Mohammed Sharif was my first stepping stone into all of development as well, subhanAllah.
Fantastic. May Allah bless him for his efforts. And then getting really into people like Kerben Ray, Les Ray, and just Simon Sinek and all these folks, and really studying and understanding the human condition, and then obviously infusing that with an Islamic paradigm, and then trying to understand how we can take this and help and be of service to the Ummah. And then we moved into, this is where we started moving into helping and relationship coaching, and obviously I wrote a book regarding marriage and stuff like that. So
is it safe to say then, hearing that very difficult journey, is it safe to say that climbing Everest really is as bad as the movies make it out to be then?
Well,
I don't know what it is. Go ahead, sorry.
Everest has a unique pull. It has a unique draw. I met people from Team Australia. I even met, it's ironic, but even the Indian Army were training when we got there. The Indian Army were training on base camp. We had Team USA, we had like Team China, we had Team Australia. That time in 2008, the Olympics were going on. So the Chinese government banned anyone from summiting Everest. So they had all these teams stuck at base camp from all over the world. Their insurance is running out. The time that they've got, like the permits are running out on Everest. And the Chinese government put a ban on everyone summiting, even though it's from the Nepal side, but no one's allowed to summit. Why? Because the Chinese wanted to take Team China with the torch, Olympic torch, to the summit as an Olympic sort of like, I guess you can say like a marketing thing. So I met a lot of people from all over, and one of the things I can tell you now is that a lot of people are drawn to that mountain for the adrenaline rush and for the thrill. I met people from all over, but one thing I say now to anyone that's contemplating that, I mean, okay, there's trekking to base camp, and then it's obviously, if you want to, you can get insurances and go with a squad and try to get to the advanced base camps and then to summit. But anyone that's attempting that from the Muslims, the only thing I can say is what I was guided by one of the ulama when I came back from Everest, because I got a lot of press exposure. So I was interviewed by a lot of the media, especially back in Scotland, a lot of newspapers, because obviously being a Muslim and at that time being so young and climbing Everest, it was something that they wanted. So I did a lot of that. But one of the ulama sat me down, I won't mention his name, he sat me down and said, look, fantastic achievement, well done. Do whatever you can to sort of like break boundaries and stuff, but don't ever put yourself into a position where you're playing Russian roulette with your life. And the reason he was saying that is, and I totally understand now looking back on it, is because above a certain level, above 7,000 meters, and this is why Everest is littered with bodies. And they can't come down. You can only, because not even a helicopter can get up there. The Sherpas can't bring them down. So the thing is, a lot of people will get above, and it's like a death zone in Everest. There's this limit between the summit and, like, I think it's like 7.5 or something to the summit. Between that level is called a death zone, and like basically people can just collapse and like never regain consciousness. And when he said that, I realised that, look, at the end of the day, again, I was I was fighting against myself, and I wanted to do something that was going to challenge me, understand my trauma of what's happened in my life, me blaming myself for not being able to do enough for my mum. And so I'm pushing myself. But then again, the wisdom of the ulama, he sat me down and he said, look, do whatever you can, break boundaries, do this, do that, but don't ever do something that you can play Russian roulette with your life, because your body is an amana. It's an amana. And so that was comforting, and that's the only thing I can say. Everest is dangerous, and but up to a certain level, if you want to go trekking in the Himalayas, do it. It's fantastic. It's the most stunning place on earth. But if you're thinking of actually summiting, then just know that it is Russian roulette. And even all of us on the team, we have to write off, we have to sign all these documents saying that if anything was to happen up there, that they're not liable, etc., etc. So it's exciting, it's fantastic, it's all this Everest, but there is a serious side to it as well.
I think it's interesting that you said it was like a low point in your life that kind of propelled you going on that journey, because I think the time that I was really interested, because I messaged you about this and I told you that I had this really, really deep desire to go and climb Mount Everest myself for a number of years. But subhanAllah, it was around the same time I was going through a very, very, probably the most difficult period in my life. And again, I think it has got to do with a lot of soul searching. So it's interesting how you're kind of drawn to those kind of experiences. But like you said, it is an amana, our bodies, and we do have to second think things. And for anyone who is going, I think they just need to watch that movie called Everest, because that certainly completely changed. It killed that dream very, very quickly for me, subhanAllah.
But can I tell you, should I quickly just say something? But there's something about our fitra, our souls are drawn to. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of people mention going to places where you're surrounded by the utter beauty of Allah's creation. I mean, when you're in the Himalayas and when you're climbing, you're at a certain altitude. I mean, you see the grandeur and the majesticness of Allah's creation. And to be honest, it takes your breath away, and it increases your iman. And again, this is one of the reasons, and I'm sure you've done Visionaire with Sheikh Mohammed Rashid, but one of the reasons he tells you to go to a beautiful place, wherever that is, to write down your power du'as, is for that. It's so that your mind can actually connect with the creation. And it's very powerful. I mean, there's signs everywhere around about us, and that's one of the signs. I mean,
no, definitely, I completely agree with you. Yeah, and if we just talk about now, you said that for you, the biggest turning point for you in your personal life came when you started studying your faith, right?
Yes.
Can you just tell us how that kind of decision came about? Obviously, you mentioned in terms of the trauma that you had experienced, like that. But was there any specific point in which you turned specifically to start studying, as you said, your religion a bit more? Was it that conversation that you had with the sheikh, or something different that happened? How do you feel that your faith actually transformed you as well?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of speaking to the sheikh, doing a lot of sort of contemplation about the service. How can I serve? How can I help people? And at that stage, I was involved with community work, a lot of community work actually during my youth, and there's a lot of fantastic people in my childhood that I owe a lot to because of their tarbiyah and their help in the community. And I was involved with YM, the Young Muslims, and ISB, and all these sort of organisations, NYC, and all these sort of really back in the 90s, and they obviously moulded me in my sort of foundation. So I was always yearning and searching to do something. But eventually I hit that point where I said, I need to commit to understanding my deen, and so what I did was I reached out to, back then, this is years ago, to Prophetic Guidance, and that's Sheikh Abu Isa's sort of institute, I guess you can say, in Manchester. And he did this fantastic series, which I recommend to everyone, called Al-Adab Al-Mufrid. In fact, it's ironic, I carry it everywhere. This is my original set that I actually used back then. Al-Adab Al-Mufrid, it's basically Imam al-Bukhari's masterpiece on good conduct. And it's obviously he made a collection of sort of in-depth sort of analysis of his book, Al-Adab Al-Mufrid. And basically this one was just, this entire set was just covering the rights and responsibilities of the parents, and it took us literally between 9 months and a year, I think, just to cover that. And so what I did was I asked him for permission to to sort of like organize that for my community and get a huge screen up and sort of like get notes, ask prophetic guidance to help me with some notes and stuff like that. So I got all that together. It's my first thing. So I managed to get the community together, and we started off like 200 people attending. And then as the weeks and the months went on, it trickled right down to like a core group of like 20, I think it was. So by the end of that 9 months, 10 months, it was like, that was like a major turning point. Yeah. And then from there, I got approached to basically join Al Maghrib Institute and to head Al Maghrib in Scotland. And one of the things about that, and this is something which I want to obviously just say to everyone that's listening as well, especially for the younger generation, that one of the core things that I'll have respect forever regarding the teachings of during my youth, especially, I mean, the times back in the 90s and the way they taught the youth is very different to today. It was very sort of like hands-on approach in halakha and sitting together and going through a system and like a shura, and then sort of like understanding and just working up the ranks. It was just a beautiful system, and being able to build brotherhood and stuff. And one thing that they taught us, and this is something that I have a lot of deep respect for, is they instilled in us not to chase power. Not to chase power, and not to chase leadership. Not to chase being an emir or in charge or something. So actually, not a lot of people know this, what I'm about to say just now, but a fantastic brother, his name is Omar Lana. He actually started off Al Maghrib Institute in Scotland, and may Allah reward him for the amazing effort he did in the beginning. He started it off, and he, after starting off Al Maghrib and introducing it to Scotland as a Kabila, he then approached me on the side quietly, like a number of times, asking me if I can sort of like take lead and join the Kabila and sort of do whatever I have to do for them. And I actually, because of the teachings of our students, our advanced students of knowledge, and our teachers back then in my youth, I was always scared about taking any position, and this is something that I really want, especially in this digital social media sort of age that we're living in, where everyone wants to just be online,
an influencer,
like an influencer. They want to be on in front of everyone. They want likes, and they want to understand subscribers and stuff like this. This is one of the reasons. Like, I could have a long time ago, I could have made a plethora of videos. I could have been on all the time, sort of like making all these short videos. But it's not me. It's not the way it's not been instilled in me. And one of the things is that this brother, he asked me to join Al Maghrib, and I said no. And I said no a few times, but then when I eventually did, I had this inclination. I made Salat Istihara. Then I went and I joined the Kabila to help them out and sort of like help the Kabila and Al Maghrib Institute get to a new level in Scotland. But he said something, and it touched me so much, and I'll take it to my grave. He said something really powerful at the initiation of when he was like introducing me to, like, because then I eventually took over as Amir for the Kabila. And he said something to the volunteers at that time, which actually stunned me. He said, like, Qasim, you know something? He said, I went to Hajj, and because I needed help with this Kabila, I was on Mount Arafah, and I was making dua on Mount Arafah, and I mentioned you by name to Allah, to allow Qasim to be part of this Kabila and help. And sort of help me with this, with sort of like running the Kabila in Scotland. And I realised then, and I still to this day think about it, that I was saying no, but the power of dua and what's for you won't go by you. I was meant to be. So a lot of people in my past would think, oh, he's on a power trip. You know, like you get your haters. He's on a power trip. He's wanting to sort of like, he wants his name everywhere, he wants his face everywhere. Just, you know yourself, there's haters everywhere. And then like he wants possession, he wants this, he wants that. But deep down, little do they know that the reason I pushed so hard was after hearing what he said. Because I realised this wasn't for me. This is actually something that he made dua for, and Allah SWT answered his dua. So I felt upon me a deep sense of commitment if Allah put me into this position because of his dua on Hajj, on Arafah, then I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure that I can do whatever I can do for this Qabila. And so I realised a lot during that time with my dawah. I found out a lot. I was so naive to dawah. I was so naive. The amount of racism, internal politics, different groupings, people saying that you're this and you're of that group and you're it's just the name calling. And someone said to me once that they were sitting in a group and they were having coffee and they were saying, "Oh, do you know Al-Maghrib? They're a bunch of Wahhabis, they're this and that." And they're having tea and muffins and coffee discussing Al-Maghrib like this. And I was like, and then another group are saying this group are Sufi, and then this group is this, then this group. And it's like, you get to realise, wow, Shaitan really is hard at work with actually fragmenting the Muslim community. And that's one of the reasons, actually. There's many reasons, but one of the reasons also, my hidden reasons of actually leaving Al-Maghrib and sort of like moving on to doing other things, was also because I want individuals to know that you're never just a name. Like, people started saying he's just, his blood is purple and that's it, just because the colours of Al-Maghrib. And people started just associating me with, rather than an individual, a Muslim, someone that cries that like them, like walks like them, like talks like them. They already had me in a box. And I was like labelled with this. And I guess this is one of the sicknesses of our community that we really have to overcome. And this is actually one of the things here in the US that mashallah, it's very different from some of the tribalness that I've seen in the UK. They're very open-minded here, very open-minded, very forward-thinking. They're like 10, 15, 20 years ahead of what's happening in the Dawah scene in the UK. Easy.
I've heard that, yeah.
And it's like, for me, it's amazing because I get to see both sides. But there are some things in the UK, some of the systems, some of the things that they do in the UK, that's amazing. Like some of the traditional sort of like way of seeking, it's fantastic. They all have their pros and cons, but the racist tribal attitude, it's so prevalent in the UK, and that's just it's like a village mentality. It's really soul destroying.
And what you do in terms of building relationships and relationship coaching, I guess that's where that comes in. I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, definitely.
And if I can ask you, with regards to the coaching, now, coaching generally, it can be applied to any aspects of life, right? To improve it and things like that. And that's because it essentially, like you said, it's about understanding human behavior and human psychology, the way that we work. And you've chosen specifically to go into relationship coaching. So can you just explain, maybe, because I think some members of the community might not understand what exactly does that entail, and why specifically you chose to specialize in that area? Because like I said, coaching is quite widespread. You can kind of coach with any area of life. So if you can just explain what exactly is relationship coaching for people and why you chose to specialize.
Well, relationship coaching, like, I don't want to get too technical, because at the end of the day, this is just a chill out section. It's not like a one-to-one coaching session or a therapy session. I just want to speak in layman's terms, and really the reality is that relationship coaching is just when you specialize and you understand the human condition and you understand what couples need, and then obviously you use a plethora of tools, from going to obviously people that have studied the science and the Self-Like Development Institute, or for instance there's Sue Johnston, who's a specialist in emotional focused therapy, etc. Like, you start to train and learn under these individuals that have spent their lifetime doing research and sort of like a lot of intense research actually into the science. But then again, at the same time, it's also to be able to understand the way we think and the way we and from a faith-based perspective, for me to understand the way Shaitan operates and the way he operates, and why it is so important for Iblis and his army to knock out the married couple. I'm sure you've heard this, but the Shaitan, Iblis' throne is in water, and every day he sends out his army to cause mischief and mayhem all over the world. And then they come back to him to report to him. And then they'll say, I made such and such do this, I made someone do this, I made someone do that. But then when one of his assistants will come and say, I broke apart a husband and wife, I tore their family apart, Iblis gets off his throne and embraces him and says, this is the job. And so to realize, I guess, from a scientific academic perspective, through like obviously psychology and understanding counseling and therapy, but then all of a sudden bringing in the aspect of Islam and what the importance of the family structure is, and understanding rights and understanding empathy, I guess, and compassion, and being able to sort of like give and take, and all of that fused in together, sort of like and because of my own past of being so reckless, I said to myself, I'm going to make sure that I can help as many individuals, couples and families not make the same mistakes I've made, because I've made a lot of mistakes in relationships, in marriages, and Allahumma barik lakum, I've realized that it's all good things come together for good, and everything comes together for a reason. There's a purpose, there's a wisdom for everything, and everything that comes about, there's a reason behind it. And I have this as my core belief that everything, every pain that you go through in life, every test, every calamity, it's basically your crucible. You're thrown into that crucible, because if you really have the tawakkul, consciousness and tawheed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you realize that through the pain, through the suffering, that you realize that you've been put into this crucible because ultimately Allah wants to use you as a tool for something, and to get back to Him, and to basically come back to Him before your time is up. And the reason I say this, a lot of people don't realize this, and a lot of people are suffering out there. I listen to a lot of people every day. It's my bread and butter, it's what I do. And a lot of people have so much anguish because they don't realize Allah's love, and they don't realize tawbah, and they do not realize that actually Allah Jalla wala loves you more than your mother and father can ever love you. People don't fathom that. They just don't fathom that. They can't understand if they're going through a crucible in their life. It's like gold. If you put gold into heat, raw gold, if you throw it into that crucible, what happens? The heat it basically takes out the impurities, and then you're left with pure gold. And that's what happens to you in life. Why? Because Allah loves you. And this is what people don't understand. It's because this life is limited. It's like a blink of an eye. The next life, the hereafter, is forever. And sometimes you have to get put through things to realign you, and to allow you to adjust and realize where you are, who you are, and to get you off your high end, to get you off your high chair, and to allow you to be able to go and sujood. Throughout my life, in the early stages, I never mentioned this, but I used to play hockey. I even represented Scotland. I was like in ice hockey, and I did all these things. I had this, like, I don't like to admit it now, but it's like I had this modelling contract. I was doing this. I was doing all these things, and I was thinking. And then at that time, I had my twin girls were born. I had things happening to me that I was thinking, this is the life. And it's like, this is just the way life is going to be. I'm always going to get what I want. It's always good. And then suddenly, 2 weeks after my twin girls are born, 2 weeks later, my house was covered in cards from, I still remember it vividly, covered. The living room was covered with pink cards. Congratulations on the twins, this and that. And then all of a sudden, within 2 weeks, my mum was taken away. So it's like life was given and life was taken. And then I remember all them cards coming down, and then cards of condolences. And then, it's like, but because of that, what happened, I am where I am now. I believe I am where I am now because of that. And when you look back in hindsight, and you look back, you realize that actually every suffering, everything has a time, there's a time limit. Some people were going through financial difficulties, extreme financial difficulties. Some people are going through extreme health issues. Some people are absolutely starving to get married because they need companionship. They need love. They need this sort of like unity of. They need their soulmate. People are yearning for that. They're doing things that they shouldn't be doing because of desperation and loneliness. All these things. But what I say is, and I say this all the time, is it's about going through the crucible. It's about going through this crucible, allowing yourself to be purified through the process, I'm coming out a resilient sheet of steel. And being able to move forward in life and to be able to take life on. But the most important thing is that you don't become this cocky, really sort of like big in the head, sort of like you stay humble. And this is one of the things that Sheikh Salman Al-Auda said to me. He said to get out of my situation I was back in the early 2000s. He said, and this will remain with me to my grave, he said, do you want success quickly? And I said, what do you mean by success? He said, do you want to get out of your tribulation? I said, yes. He said, walk upon the earth gently. And this is, he's speaking in Arabic, and I had someone translating. He said, walk upon this earth with humility and gently. And even if people will think that you're doing this because of that reason, you're doing this because of that reason, that you're showing off, or you're this or you're that, let them think. But the reality is that walk on this earth gently and do something. I said, what? He said, every time someone that hates you, that's jealous of you, that doesn't like you, that wants to cause you harm, that's one category. And then just the awam. He said the awam, whenever you walk by someone, see something, make dua for them. That's what he said. He said, that'll raise your rank, and that'll raise you in a way that you can't even fathom. And I was so young then, and I was like, okay. And so I started sort of trying it out. So I'll be walking by, and if I see a Muslim or even a non-Muslim, like in a certain position, I'll make dua for them. And I've kept this going to this day. I mean, I make dua for Justin Trudeau to become a Muslim. I make dua I make dua for Russell Brand to become Muslim. You get it? So and then people that I know that I've maybe caused harm is my own fault. That I've actually I've broken hearts. I've caused harm. I've not done things in a way to family members, to friends. I know that I'm not an angel, and I've done my fair share, and I will do. I'm human. We're all flawed in this beautiful tapestry of flaw. But that's who we are. We are Bani Adam. We are the children of Adam, and that's what we're going to do. And the thing, but is that what he taught me then was stick to your athkar. Actually, sorry, I missed the part. He said, stick to your athkar. And I'll discuss that in the end. Stick to your athkar and walk gently on the earth and make dua for the people when they don't even know you're making dua for them. And every time they say something to you or they think that they know you, you lower your wings of humility and just sort of like realize that this is just a short life. And eventually these people, and this is so deep, this is going to blow your minds, eventually all these people, talk about the Muslims inshallah, all these people of faith, the people that said La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, all these individuals, whether they are this position in this dunya or this position, or they're like one of the OG gangsters and they're into drugs and they're into womanizing, whatever they are, whatever spectrum from the ulama all the way down, one day will come when inshallah all these people, okay, the sinners, the righteous, everyone will be together in Jannah. Even if they have to go through the purification of going through the grave and then through the hellfire, but eventually these people will all be together. You'll be all together in Jannah. And that thing that's in us, in our human DNA, which is jealousy, envy, hatred, so like this sort of like ego and this sort of like narcissistic behavior that a lot of us have, especially in this generation, especially like the millennial generation, should I say, with that, if I don't get too much hate for that. But we tend to forget that eventually we're not going to remember any of this because it'll be taken out of our DNA. And the person that your neighbour or your cousin or your family member that you hate their guts because they've done black magic on you, or you've had a nasty divorce and now the mother's doing severe parental alienation against your own children, or vice versa, the father's being absolutely a psychopath towards his ex. Eventually, it's about you doing your best and walking on this earth gently. And even through the trauma of the evil, pure evil that people do, you walk away knowing that Allah's just and He'll deal with them. But eventually you'll all be in Jannah, the good and the bad. But Jannah does have layers, so strive for the highest layer.
Of course, inshallah. And as a coach, and you're coaching these couples and these families, what would you say is like the main trend in issues nowadays that people are facing? What kind of common problems are you facing as a coach? Because obviously you might be well aware of what they are and the commonalities, but not a lot of people approach coaches like yourself for it, because there's a lot of taboo. So maybe they're just thinking, what I'm going through is completely different. And a lot of people, they feel that kind of shame, the sense of shame and things like that. So maybe in sharing what you see as quite common problems that people approach you with, maybe that might give people a bit of an idea and a bit of confidence. It's not just them.
Do you know, honestly, this is exactly where I need a glass of water just now. This, what you've just asked, is like, it's such a deep, deep question. And let me just put it into a summary. I get to deal, and I guess this is one of the gifts, and I thank Allah all the time, that some people they message me saying, how do you deal with this? I have family and friends that say to me, how do you deal with the drama and the dark side of so many people? But I just reply and saying, look, at the same time I have all this darkness and hearing all these things, but at the same time I have a lot of good things I'm hearing through my premarital coaching and people falling in love and getting together and starting a new life together. So it's all balanced. But the thing that I would say just now, the thing that's hitting our Muslim communities especially the worst, especially in the West. I mean, the East has their issues, and I have clients from the Middle East, I have clients from other parts of the world, but focusing just on the West, it's this age of living in that Tinder society, like this. Do you understand? I'm sure a lot of the folks will understand what I say when I say that. We're living in a generation now where it's just like swipe right, swipe left if you want to go out and have fun. And when I say fun, I mean do whatever you want, cross all boundaries. And we're living in that sexual sort of like over hyper sexualized time. And so what I'm realizing is that the biggest pandemic, the spiritual pandemic that we have at the moment, we have obviously the physical pandemic of the virus, but we have within the Ummah a spiritual pandemic, which is the weakening of the hearts and the covering of the hearts with what people don't realize is sin. And they've taken it so lightly. And so what ends up happening is that people will engage in courting. Just now, one of the biggest problems we're having in the community is understanding how to court properly. Courting is the amount of clients that come to me, and I mean, it's scary to say the patterns that I've observed. And shall I say this or shall I not on live there? I'm just trying to contemplate if this is wise, what I'm about to say. Do the people need to know this? Yes, they do. So one of the main issues just now is the community and the way they understand courting. And I have a lot of, and I've seen a pattern now over the years where individuals, especially young individuals who are really looking forward, really want to get married, they're in university or they've just finished university, but what ends up happening is they start to sort of like go on this, let's find a husband, let's find a wife sort of trip, I guess you can say. And what ends up happening is they'll end up finding someone and it's all good, but what ends up happening is they'll have something that they'll start doing which will start to cause a stain in the way I describe it to my clients is the purity, wholesomeness and the barakah of the initial steps. From the most innocent, which is the innocence of like flirtation. Okay, I get it. Like, I'm a realist. I'm not going to sit here and just say we have to be like angels, and I'm not like that. I mean, I deal with enough people. I understand human condition. I understand our weaknesses. It's all exciting times. You're looking to find someone. You're speaking to them. You're sort of like engaging with them. You're getting to understand one another. But then there's a boundary. There's a line that they start to cross. So it starts with the sort of like flirtation, then it moves up to the sexual innuendos, and it moves up to, let me see you in like wearing this, let me see you without hijab, and then from there it moves on to let's meet, and then they start crossing boundaries to the extent where people are doing the most. They're doing things, let's just put it, that they shouldn't be doing in every aspect, from online sex to meeting up and actually being intimate way before the nikah. And all in the name of but she's going to be my wife, or he's going to be my husband. And the hours and hours of chat, FaceTiming, and all of this in seclusion. And it just grows and it grows. And then what do we have? We have the case of, I'm bored now. I'm actually looking, she's not quite what I thought. He's not what quite I thought. Masalama. And now they're in. At the same time, they're simultaneously looking at someone else. So they have someone that they're dating someone else, like in the side. And these are the things that I'm seeing that's happening a lot. And I'm dealing a lot with clients, especially premarital, when we start discussing these things openly. Yeah. And honestly, and I do say to be transparent, because if you're not transparent and open, we cannot move. We cannot help in some of these gridlock situations that you're finding already. And and then what ends up happening is, like, you have people, and this is the strange pattern that I've seen, and this is just over the years I've realised that people that go down that route of things, even though they get married, there's two camps. There's people that transgress the bounds in courting, and then after they've done that, then they get married. So either they force their parents to marry them, or both sides of the parents agree. Well, there's two sides of this. One is that the couple repent and they make sincere tawbah. And I'm not just talking about, okay, we've done everything now, let's repent, as in just like a very blasé sort of approach, but sincerely in shock, in severe guilt, like, what have we done? We've crossed boundaries. They're giving sadaqah. Some of them I know go to umrah. Like, this is a healthy approach, because we're human, we're weak, we're going to make mistakes.
Sure.
So what ends up happening is they make tawbah, and then they move on, they get married, and they carry on. But then you get this other side who transgress all the bounds during courting. They don't make tawbah, and then they get married. I'm not going to say wallahi, because I'm not saying taking oaths by Allah, but all I can say to you is I've seen a huge pattern with people within the first 6 months, between 6 to 18 months, everything goes pear-shaped and they're divorced. And not only that, they hate each other's guts. Like, to the extent, and if it's just war, it's outright war then. It's like they're savage with each other. They're brutal. And if there's children involved, like a newborn, or it's like someone, like, even if it's just, it gets so messy. So that's one thing that I'm realizing a huge problem is, and this is something that I do really recommend all our people, all our imams, and people who are on the front line, because there's only so many people I can see. There's only so many people you can see. There's only so many people. I mean, my wife, as you know, mashallah, she's a public speaker, and I mean, I guess a lot of people have read her book, Reclaim Your Heart. And the thing about Yasmin and her work is, like, I get to travel a lot with Yasmin, and because I manage, actually what I also do is I manage all her logistics and all her sort of like bookings. So I'm like her manager as well at the same time. So we're like a husband and wife team, managing that, and then I'm still doing this inside. But one thing I've realised travelling to many different destinations around the world is I've realised that what I'm saying is actually something that a lot of sisters come to Yasmin and speak to her about as well. The exact same issues. Like, I was with this guy, like, we crossed boundaries because he was just so nice. But at the same time, it's not just the guys, sometimes it's the sisters. They're like so wanting to get this guy that they're lowering their standards, they're lowering the boundaries. And then sometimes just because they're not 21 and married yet, they're like, we're on a timeline, and we're like, and they start putting all this undue pressure on themselves. And it's not just them, actually. I blame the families and the culture as well. They put all this, like, really intense pressure on them, and then they end up lowering the boundaries, rather than, like I mentioned, sitting back, going through the crucible of whatever that crucible is in their life, whether it's a little bit patience that's needed, whether it's not rushing with every single person, or pouring your heart out and getting emotionally attached. That's another fitna just now, is that with the courting, is the online emotional attachments that are forming before marriage with a plethora of different people. So that let's stick with that. So the main thing is that's an issue. My wife has seen it in the public sphere. She gets to hear about it a lot. Me and Yasmin discuss a lot of these issues together, and we see these patterns.
Yeah.
And so there's that element. And people need to understand how to court in a healthy way without getting emotionally and physically attached. It's as simple as that. It's not rocket science. Every person you go to meet, you don't have to, or a potential rishta, you understand, doesn't mean that you have to fall in love with them. Literally, the problem now is that everyone's falling in love. And love is such a powerful force. And once you fall in love, that's it. It's like the way I say it, it's game over. Do you understand? It takes a lot. And then the aftermath of that is what? It's a heartbreak. The amount of couples, the amount of brothers that I speak to who are like seriously traumatized because they thought it was working out. And then the girl just says, "Masalam, I'm actually going to I found someone else," and gone through all of this. And the vice versa, the same with the sisters. The problem now is that people are falling in love too quickly, getting emotionally attached and then physically attached, crossing boundaries, whereas there should be a healthy, amicable, mature way of just dealing with, right, this is a potential, and following the Quran and the Sunnah, and then being realistic about your situation and following safety measures. You should be able to, inshallah, walk forward in a way that protects your barakah and wholesomeness of your marriage to move forward.
Sure. And in terms of, so we'll come to the premarital, because I know you offer premarital services as well. That's the main problem we see with pre-married couples. What about married couples that come to you? What is like the main issues that you see kind of trending in our community?
Yeah, a lot of the main issues that I'm seeing with couples just now, unfortunately, is pornography addiction. So it's pornography addiction. These are couples are married, and pornography addiction, it's infidelity, and then the other big one will be lack of communication and emotional intelligence. So
that's really
sorry, carry on. What were you saying?
I was going to say, it's interesting that these are issues that you're not the first person I've heard that from, especially about the pornography and infidelity and things like that. Yet, subhanAllah, it still remains a taboo in our community to talk about it, and that it kind of confuses me, because people know that in Islam there's no dichotomy between secular and what is religious, right? That's why we all say it's a way of life.
Exactly.
And as that, the Quran itself, as our guide, it talks about everything, right? And it includes things about infidelity. It includes things that lead to pornography, such as lowering the gaze and all these kind of things. And it talks about even things that are not the norm in our society. It's kind of like I would say things that are on the fringe of the community, things that don't happen that much, but they're still mentioned in the Quran just to protect our community, subhanAllah, so we know what's right and wrong. And the fact that we have that and we claim to follow the Quran, but these issues still remain a taboo, it really confuses me. I don't know if you find the same kind of confusion as to why we don't talk about these things more often, why we don't address them in our community. Is this something you still think is a taboo?
No, can I actually add one more thing to that list? Because I was just I was going through and I was trying to sort of like filter like my clients and like over the last 2-3 years, like what are the patterns I'm seeing, and here while being in the US, and one of the patterns that I need to add to that is the taboo of domestic abuse. This sort of like shunning away from the reality of what is domestic abuse, and people within the families empowering that. That for me is, it's scary. That scares me. When people within a family, whether it's a joint family or an extended, they actually have issues going on. And then you have other family members protecting that individual, whether it's the sister or whether it's a brother, from actually standing up against that dhulm, that oppression. So I'll give you an example, I know of someone just now who I'm dealing with a couple who they got, the sister married this brother. The brother was like apparently all okay in the beginning, but the family hid the fact that he was bipolar. And so what ended up happening was that as the initial months started moving, she started realizing this huge sort of like issue with her husband, with his sort of like manic behavior and his like anger outbursts and all this, and then all of a sudden, not only that, but he was someone that was like a sex addict. Like, he was addicted to pornography, and he was addicted to like going to prostitutes and doing this and doing that, and the people knew about this, but they kept it quiet. And why? Because what would the Joneses say? Or like in Urdu they say ha ha, like kya kenge. That basically just means, oh my god, what they're going to say if we can't get our son married, or if we can't get our daughter married, and what they're going to say. So we have to just hush, hush, hush. Let's get them all married off, clean their hands, everything will be okay. No, it won't be. Everything's okay. It actually turns out to be a disaster, and especially if kids are born, it just becomes so messy. And that's the problem. It's like that I find scares me, when you can have someone doing domestic abuse, or they have issues that are happening and others around about them, instead of doing the Quranic prophetic model, which is to get mediators from both sides, sit down, have a mature, amicable discussion about it, or get a third party, get a person of knowledge, whether that's a student of knowledge or an advanced student of knowledge, or someone from a scholarly position, an imam, you get someone together, sit down, and you sort of like amicably discuss the situation, lay the cards out on the table. But instead, it's all this, and this is poisonous. And this is another thing. Yeah. It's absolutely poisonous. And I've
seen this myself, subhanAllah. You know, I know people very, very close to me who have got married to people who have been praised by the community, and subhanAllah later found out that this person is addicted to pornography, addicted to gambling. And when it's presented to the family are not in any shock whatsoever. They're actually quite relieved, because to them it's not as bad as they thought. Maybe their son was involved in drugs. So at least it's not drugs. SubhanAllah. And that kind of attitude, and people knowing what their children are going through, yet happily giving them away to families, to other sisters or brothers. And I just find it so shocking. And it just, whenever I hear these things, especially when you say this whole shush factor, it just takes me back, subhanAllah, to, as Muslims, you know, the Quran is our guide. And the one example that comes in my mind of this, and the danger of that as well as a Muslim, it comes to the Prophet Salih alayhi salam. You know, when the people of his community, they came and killed the camel, it wasn't the whole community that came and killed the camel, it was 7 individuals. And of those 7 individuals, there was only one who had the guts to do it. And yet, subhanAllah, the whole community was destroyed. Why? It wasn't some injustice on the part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was simply because the community knew what was going to be planned. They knew what was going to happen. They knew what was intended, yet they did nothing. They kept silent, subhanAllah. And, you know, these stories are not just stories to entertain us, as you know. These are stories we're supposed to take practical advice from, practical, role modeling for us. So, subhanAllah, it really does, it completely surprises me why people, individuals, especially within the Muslim community, why they have that attitude. SubhanAllah, it saddens me.
Can I quickly, while we're on this topic, just mention to the extent that it's got to, Yasmin was on tour, and we were in Germany. Actually, we were on tour, and she was doing obviously her public speaking events in Germany. I think it was Germany, it was Amsterdam. Actually, it was Germany. And what ended up happening was, this sister that was taking us around actually explained of a situation that just happened in the community. And this is going back to the domestic violence situation that I mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
So she basically said that there was this sister who was being abused by her husband, and what she ended up doing was that she went back to her mother and her father and her brothers, and basically went back to her family and said, look, this is the situation, I'm being abused, not just emotionally abused, but actually physically abused as well. And they said, don't worry, have sabr, everything will be okay, we all have our ups and downs in marriage. But she knew that this is a chronic situation. It's happening. It's not just a one-off, and that's it. It's chronic. It's happening again and again. And she explained that to her mom. She sat down her with her father, with her brothers, explained it all. Then they eventually said, look, just give him another chance, have sabr. Maybe it's he had this or this issue, or maybe it's just the way you approached it. And she said, okay, like, mom, dad, I'll do it, inshallah, I'll go back. So she went back, and within a couple of days, she phones her mum and dad and says, look, we've got a huge blowout, a huge argument, and I want you to come over here and sort the situation out. And so the father and the brothers father and her brother got together in the car, went to pick her up and sort of deal with the situation. By the time they got there, she had died. She was murdered. And me and Yasmin just sort of like, we were like, and we hear things like this all the time. And that's the thing. It's like we hear things like this all the time. So we're just like sitting there discussing the situation, things subhanAllah. I mean, this is something that even Yasmin discusses a lot in her talks, which is, it's a beautiful thing and I love explaining this to my clients, is that, look, when you're in this, especially in family coaching, I speak a lot to families as well. And this is something that I discuss with the family as a whole. So everyone is there, from the fathers, the mothers, the children, and sometimes even the grandparents. And I sit there and we have this live call, Skype call or something, and we discuss these issues in depth. Yeah. And one of the things that I discuss with them is something that Yasmin mentions, which is this sort of like putting a Band-Aid, on a gunshot wound, the way she explains it in her talks, which is like you've been wounded, and that is obviously, we're referring to domestic violence here, like emotional abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse. So what you end up doing is you just put a Band-Aid on it, thinking that, something, a bit of Band-Aid is going to go away, but it doesn't. It rots to its core, and it gets infected. And the reality is that eventually what ends up happening is, if you've done that, and you've not looked after that wound, you're going to have to end up amputating your arm or something if you don't look after it, or your leg, or whatever. Do you understand? So that's the thing, is a lot of families will say, what will our cousins, what will our rishtadar say, what will they say, what will these neighbours say, what will these people think? And they've made what people think they're gods, they've made what people think they're ilah. And this is shirk. This is shirk. Because instead of now standing up to something that's oppressive and not right and dealing with it, I mean, I'm not saying everything has to be a divorce case. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying deal with it in a mature, amicable way as a family. But the reason it rots and rots and rots and gets to an extent where it's toxic beyond toxic is because they leave it to rot. And then what ends up happening is that it rots to the extent where you start having cases like this, or you start having cases then finally when the divorce does come, it's not an amicable divorce, it's a savage, brutal divorce where they're going through the court, asking for alimony, they're not allowing the children to see the mother or the father, which is dhulm upon dhulm. And I know of cases, I know a brother who came to me crying his eyes out. He was saying, like, my wife, my ex-wife has gone so spiteful that I have 2 daughters and a son, and for the last 3-4 years I haven't been able to see them. Why? Because she put all these false allegations on me of child molestation and this. She actually made up all this stuff, which actually got disproved in court. But still, with some technicality, she got away with not getting him to see the kids. So it's like, and then he's crying to me saying, like, what am I going to do? I can't see my kids. But then again, I've had the opposite. I've had families come to me saying, look at what the ex-husband is doing. He's completely alienated the children, poisoned the children to the extent where they're now saying F off to the mum, saying, we don't want you, you're poisonous, you're evil. We want our father. He's the true hero. And the amount they don't...
Sorry, go ahead.
So they just don't realise, and this is something they don't realise, this is actually child abuse. Parental alienation is child abuse. And the reality is that they think these parents that are doing this, like weaponizing the children against each other because they have grudges and out of spite, they don't realise that they're actually damaging the children. I've read so many reports on this. You can go onto Google and find a plethora of reports by deep researchers in the field of child psychology, and they'll tell you the long-term effects of parental alienation is destruction for the children. They don't know how to handle their own personal relationships. They have anger management issues when they get older. And there's a plethora of other things that they can't handle when they become adults. And then on top of that, because that's your fitrah, you're cutting that link with your mother, your father through spite and hate and sort of like propaganda. And this is something that's rife now within our community as well. And it's a dhulm that needs to be stopped and addressed. Domestic violence, pornography, the quoting issue, all these issues need to be handled by our imams at the minbar, to speak to the Jama'ah, to speak every Friday about these sort of topics. I am full on for the topics that are always being covered, but there needs to be some hard topics covered regarding what's facing our communities. From Malaysia, I have clients from Malaysia, they're dealing with these issues. I have clients in Australia that are dealing with these issues. From Kenya and Africa, and then the US. These are global issues, do you understand? It's not just a certain area of Bradford or a certain area of London that's happening in. It's global. It's what's affecting our ummah.
Of course, you're saying that there needs to be this, I guess, like a renewal of teaching people in terms of their faith, and it's not all about rights, it's about duties as well, and things like that. And it needs to be spoken about by our imams and our leaders. But obviously, I don't want this conversation just to be us highlighting the problems without, certain steps. There are certain people, for example, who are not as empowered to take action. They do come from a very cultural background. They're kind of suffering. For example, some sisters are suffering in these situations where they're being financially, emotionally abused. And maybe they don't have that kind of willpower or the strength. I know me, myself, I was in an abusive marriage before, but just my strong type of personality, even though I do come from a little bit of a cultured background, I was not having it. I'm the type of person, very resilient type of individual, and I managed to get myself out of that marriage, alhamdulillah. But there are a lot of people I know, even close to me, who don't have that same personality. They don't seem to have that strength. They've maybe gone through it for a lot longer, and it's a lot deeper, the issues that they're facing. And they can't necessarily turn to their family because, like you said, they have this cultural thing about, what's people going to say and what's going to happen, etc. So what kind of practical, maybe 1 or 2 tips could they take as baby steps forward, do you think? Other than obviously coming to a coach and trying to work through that, maybe, what kind of tips do you have?
Okay, I think the most important thing is obviously putting therapy aside, because that's that's a paramount. To actually understand your situation and get help, to be able to bring a couple together, family together, to have a third party involved is all very important. But some baby practical steps for a brother or a sister that's going through abuse or trauma, or whether that's physical or emotional abuse. If it's physical abuse, then my straight up advice is that needs to stop straight away, and you need to contact whichever part of the world that you're in. I know the UK have got a fantastic setup. I know here in the US is a fantastic setup. You get this number that you just call, and you'll be in touch with. I'm talking about Muslim services here, by the way. There's obviously there's the services that you get that are much geared for the wider community, which is fantastic. But I'm saying that if you feel shy and timid to approach these, and you want someone that can maybe speak your language because there's a language barrier, or there's an issue where you want someone that can relate to you on a faith-based level, and then I think that there's a lot of help out there. There's groups in Canada, there's groups in the US, there's groups in the UK that I know of, that inshallah I can share the details with you if you want, and you can sort of put them on under your in your comment section, inshallah. It's these groups that basically are geared and set up towards giving you free advice, allowing you to, if you're in a toxic situation when there's no way out, you can actually call these individuals. They'll help you. They'll help you financially. They'll accommodate you, especially if it's physical or sexual abuse. There are people out there that can instantly give you a hand. So and all it is a matter of you finding or getting in contact with these people, and trust me, where there's a will, there's a way. And when you take that first step towards stopping that sort of oppression, Allah Jalla Wala, and you make that intention that, I know so many people, and so many people approach my wife and say, I'm stuck in this gridlock situation, but when I take the first step and I put my tawakkul, my trust in Allah, Allah opens a way for me. And this is the thing, it's because it's years of suppression and oppression that causes this trauma bond, or causes these bonds to form neurologically, where you think you are really that person, you haven't got a life, it's like they wipe away your self-esteem, issues, and especially within these houses. They destroy your self-confidence. They make you. They destroy your ability to be secure and confident in yourself. So the best thing to do is fight against that. Reach out. The first thing you have to do is reach out. After calling out to Allah, then do the next step. Put your trust in Allah, and then tie the camel. Put your trust, but simultaneously be doing something. Take a physical action towards getting some sort of help. If it's not to that extreme, if it's just something that you're dealing with and you just need to sort of like understand how to get out of some rough sort of like emotional times or mental health issues, at the lower end of the spectrum, then really there's a plethora of stuff on YouTube. There's a lot of stuff actually on YouTube that are self-aid tools to actually where you can actually go through some simple exercises. There's a lot of stuff in CBT, there's a lot of stuff through NLP, there's a lot of stuff where they actually allow you to sort of like understand yourself and to be able to get rid of a lot of toxic negative thinking patterns that are very self-destructive, and they allow you to sort of like start having a lot more positive thoughts, teaching you steps on how to have more positive thoughts, and to actually start affirming, have positive affirmations. That's something that's vital, especially in this day and age, for young Muslim men and women that are suffering a lot from self-esteem issues, is to actually start to do a lot of positive affirmations, and really all of that stuff, these little things are online that you can start to sort of like read a lot of sort of like self-help books. And another thing on the other spectrum is go to people like yourself, like a Quran coach. Go and find someone that you can sort of like relate to, that can sort of like give you sukoon and sakina through the remembrance of Allah and through the prophetic guidance. Listen, and honestly, seriously, listen to the people, like listen to our ulama, listen to like our shaykh, like Umar Suleiman, like Sheikh Yasser Qadi, like mashallah, listen to the stuff that Yasmin does. Like, it's a lot of stuff that it's very powerful, and it's like it's a paradigm shift. It can actually get you to a completely new level of thinking and allow you to take steps towards actually empowering yourself towards a new break. And that's the thing, is you need to, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to change the condition of the people until they change themselves. And it's about you having the willpower and the tenacity and the actual grit. It's all about the grit to say enough. I am now going to change, and I'm going to empower myself through prophetic knowledge and through academic knowledge, or through advice, nasiha, speaking to friends, to be able to empower myself, to be able to move forward.
I think that's fantastic advice. Yeah, alhamdulillah, I think that's fantastic advice. And I do hope people do listen to that advice, inshallah, and take that on board. And I think it starts as well with realizing that there's no shame in the situations that people face. Because, you know, a lot of people, they might look into the Quran if they're struggling with marital issues, and they look at, you know, Ibrahim alayhi salam with his wife, or they look at the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with his wife. But people don't really, you know, they overlook the fact that there are other couples mentioned in the Quran, like Fir'aun and Asya, right? Or they overlook the fact of Lut alayhi salam with his wife. And the same with siblings as well. They'll look at Harun and Musa, but, you know, how many people reflect on Yusuf alayhi salam with some of his brothers? And there's all these different family dynamics in the Quran, subhanAllah, some which we would classify as positive, some as negative. And these things are just to show you that it's not necessarily to do with your iman, that you're in these situations, it's your spiritual standing with Allah, but this is just life, right? You're human beings, we have these experiences to go through. So I really hope that people will reflect on those stories and allow them to, you know, empower them from the Quran to, like you said, you know, really going back to a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and taking that action that you've mentioned, those kind of practical steps as well. So Jazakallah khairan for that. One thing I wanted to point out as well, I noticed that you offer specifically male coaching, which kind of took my interest. So I wanted to just, if you could share with our audience a little bit about what male coaching is exactly, and why you chose to offer that as a specific service. Because it's not something that I've seen as a coach, or, you know, especially in the Muslim community anyway. Sure.
One of the reasons I specialise within sort of like the male coaching aspect is because I realised that there was a dire, and when I say dire, I actually mean dire need for it in the community. The amount of issues that fellow men have to deal with. And I use myself as an example all the time. I just felt that I just wished that during a certain point of my life that there was someone that was dynamic and academically and religiously endowed enough during my wild, rebellious sort of teenage years to be able to sort of like guide me on understanding my emotions and guide me on understanding my feelings and guide me on understanding what the myths of masculinity actually are. These myths, these toxic myths, that a man is not allowed to feel, that a man is not allowed to cry, a man has to suppress everything. Why? Because he has to be stoic. Because when a man is stoic, that's a real sign of a man. Like when he is like all brawn and he's carved up like with a chisel physically, and he's a good fighter. He can like do this. That's a man's man. Do you understand? And when it comes to dealing with women, it's just just very blasé. Like either you love me or you don't. Do you understand? The world is my oyster, sort of attitude. So like this system of understanding and sort of like belittling women and thinking like that's just the way life is. And then watching, and obviously coming from a background where I've seen a lot of the Indo-Pak community operate. So like when you have people within the India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, sort of like subcontinent, where the Indian subcontinent, where you have men that are like they don't express their feelings. And I'm not being stereotypical here. I don't want to brush and say everyone's like that. I'm just saying,
sure.
But the majority, a lot of the people, like they don't express their feelings to their children. They don't express love in front of the children. So many people come to me, and I'm dealing with so many couples in their 40s and their 50s. People have been married for 20 years, 25 years, and they say to me like, my husband just doesn't know how to express love, or my wife doesn't actually know how to express love. They don't know how to attach to the children. They don't. And when you do a timeline and you realize it actually all stems from they've never seen love in their homes. They've actually never seen their mothers and fathers flirt with each other. They've never seen their mothers and fathers kiss. Like where are children going to learn the bunyad, like the foundation of good, healthy love and romance and flirtation and a joint commitment, like this wonderful dynamic of a husband and wife? Where are they going to learn that from? If it's not going to be from the home, if it's not from the home, where are they going to learn the attributes and the skills when a father is embracing the mum and saying, "You're absolutely stunning today. You're looking drop dead gorgeous," and then the mum or saying back to the dad, like the wife saying to her husband, "But you're not looking like you brush up really nicely yourself, and you're this," and then a kiss there, and like holding hands while sitting and watching Netflix, or embracing each other while reading the Quran and pondering over something. You don't find a lot of that. And then what ends up happening is that the children are raised on a really deluded, over-sexualized understanding of what healthy love is, what healthy relationships are. And they can't move that forward into their relationships. And so with that, this is one of the reasons, because I realize that men need to be able to understand and voice out their frustrations, their anguishes, the things that they keep suppressed in them, because men, they suppress. And when men suppress, they say, I can handle this, I've got this. But the reality is that they're breaking apart inside, and it's causing a plethora of physical and mental health issues. And then eventually what ends up happening is suppress, and then they explode. And so a lot of men explode in the forms of mental health issues and deep depression, anxiety. They look for escapism. So that's why you find a lot of men, and this is going to be very deep, and I pray that I don't get a lot of hate for this, but a lot of men that go and excessively spend time outdoors with their mates and excessively are going to the gym. I'm talking about married couples here, who are excessively going to the gym, who are excessively just playing computer games in the house, who are excessively avoidant of basic stuff within the family dynamic, with the wives and with the children. A lot of it is because they're depressed internally. They have a lot of anxiety and stress, and they don't know how to handle things, so they run and escape. They go into their little man caves. And for people of knowledge, it's different. Like people that are studying the deen, they'll go into their little man caves when they're married, and they think that's all deen. And they spend hours and hours. I know of a case of religious people who are practicing mashallah, may Allah guide them and increase them, inshallah, but they will neglect so much of their family because they've missed an entire section of understanding emotional intelligence, vulnerability, commitment, relation. They miss that entire thing, and they zone in that. But why did they zone in? Because they don't understand how to handle their emotions. They don't understand how to handle a conversation with their wives. That's the reason that a lot of men do this, these forms of escapism. And then sadly, a lot of people then turn to other forms of escapism because they can't handle the situations of understanding their feelings, their emotion, understanding their stresses, understanding this reality of what a man, this Michelin sort of man that they have to be. And at the moment they lose a job, or they don't get the promotion that they need, or they've not got the physique that they wanted, or they see their cousins and their relatives and these other people have got more than them, then there's this raw sort of like ego, which is like, I need to beat them, I need to be better than them. And then sometimes their cultures promote that, their parents even promote that, and it becomes toxic. And so now what I do is I love speaking to men one-on-one, speaking to them for like really heart-to-heart issues. I've had grown men who are bodybuilders break down like children, cry for the entire session. Do you know why? Because they were never hugged by their fathers. I'm not, like, hands up, like they were never hugged by their fathers.
SubhanAllah.
And then they look to become something just to get validation. And to get acknowledged, do you understand, from others, just to feel like, I mean, it's crazy. And then you find men that have been, like, really had a hard time and they've been really abused. I mean, a lot of people talk about domestic violence and abuse and all this, but a lot of people miss this reality of men being abused by, when I say abused, it's obviously this is a minority that get physically abused, but the mental abuse that men go through, it's unbelievable. The amount of mental abuse that men go through. And men are not like women. When it comes to women, have got this God-given gift that, mashallah, the sisters can go and sit with a group of sisters, call their mom, they can call their aunties, they can call their best friends, they can go to the house and they can sit there and have a really good discussion, heart to heart. Men don't do that as much. They do it, but in a very macho sort of like, hey, let's go and play basketball, let's go and play football, and let's go and do this. And it takes a lot of guts and courage for a man to be able to have the courage, quite frankly, to say, do you know something? Hey, Jamal, can I just sit with you and talk to you, because something's weighing heavy on my heart. I don't know how to handle my marriage, and I've just lost my job, or I'm addicted to this because I have a problem physically and I can't speak to anyone. They can't do that. It's such a male ego thing that they feel like everyone's going to think, what sort of like, you're not a guy, you're not a real man, man it up, beef it up, what the hell are you talking about? So women have got this tendency that they can pour out their hearts with other sisters and their relatives with ease, relative ease, compared to what men. So what ends up happening? You have an entire plethora of men suppressing all the time. And so now when they find another guy who's just like them, who's gone through the same traumas as them, and I mean, I've sat with guys who have, mashallah, like really opened up. They do their positive affirmations, they're doing all their CBT exercises, and they flourish. I've met guys that have completely, from 10 years addiction on pornography, have, mashallah, over like a span of like maybe 12 months, 14 months, managed to kick the habit, get into some fantastic habits, realign their marriages, realign sort of like their deen aspect, and then sort of like shoot off in another tangent. And that's the good thing about men, is men just need other men sometimes to be like giving them that confidence boost. And then once you do that, like the amazing ability and the beautiful thing about men is once men get that, they're like, that's them, they're on their trajectory, nothing can stop them. Once they get empowered with some knowledge, with specific confidence boosting or mental health knowledge, or understanding how to get out of a certain problem, once they do that, they're like, shoot off. And this is something that I salute all men in, is mashallah, they have the grit and the courage like lions to go and do that. But a lot of the time they're scared, senseless to take the first step and ask for help.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree that there is this image. Yeah, there is this image of, what a man should look like, what a man should be like. He should have it all together all the time. He should know what he's doing in life and just get on with it, kind of thing. So, and something interesting when you said that, men need other men. I wish that a lot more people realize just how relevant the Quran is to their life. Even if we look at this issue of almost half of the entire Quran is just full of stories of the past, right? And primarily they deal with the prophets. And the prophets were, not that there isn't any mention of women, of course there are, but they're mainly to do with the prophets. And the prophets were men, right? And subhanAllah, if you reflect on their life is a constant working on themselves, is a constant growth, right? So they're going through intense raw emotions, like Yaqub alayhi salam with his grief, like Musa with his fear. These are men who are going through, Yunus with his anger, Adam with his guilt. So you see all of these prophets who are going through raw, intense emotions, who are working through it and developing themselves throughout their lives. And they're making mistakes as well. Adam, he ate from the tree. Yunus, he left his people earlier than he should have. So these are people who are making mistakes. These are the Anbiya of Allah. And they're called Ahsan al-Qasas, right? The best of stories, because they deal with the best of creation. Yet they are men, and they are experiencing emotions. They are working through things. They are growing. So subhanAllah, the fact that you said, men, they need men, I think that, a lot of the time as well, obviously we need physical role models around us as well, in the world around us, and coaches, inshallah. But as well, I hope people do take note of the fact that the Quran has these amazing role models as well, and they are men as well, subhanAllah, for them to learn from and to take guidance from as well.
And just on what you're saying there, the most important thing to take away is that you, obviously through the Quranic text and the hadith, you realize like they were not shy of being vulnerable, and men are afraid of being vulnerable. It's a vulnerability aspect that shakes a man to his core about being vulnerable. But whereas if you look at the Anbiya and look at the Sahaba and the Tabi'in and the Tabi'in and the way they operated, they were not shy of being vulnerable. Vulnerable in front of Allah, vulnerable in front of their fellow colleagues. And this is something that we've missed out. And do you know why that is? It's because of this narcissistic, egotistical social media reality that we're living in just now. That's one of the reasons it's caused this to get to this level.
SubhanAllah, yeah, that's great insight. Jazakallah khair for sharing that with us. And I do think it's a really important service. That's why it really stood out to me, because I think that we need more of it, inshallah. And obviously, everything has a knock-on effect. So when we start dealing with men and women, as individuals, it knocks off obviously as families and as parents as well, alhamdulillah. Just going to wrap things up, inshallah. In terms of now, a lot of people are in, obviously we're in the last days of Ramadan now, and because of this, we know there's no dichotomy in Islam between what's secular and what's not. A lot of people, they might have increased in their ibadah, so they really might be happy about, increasing their prayer and reading Quran, etc. But maybe there's a little bit of a guilt in terms of their relationships. Maybe their relationships weren't that great. Maybe they're hurt from people or upset or whatnot. They're feeling all these kind of emotions towards relationships that they have that are broken. And that's come at the forefront, obviously, because Ramadan is a time of forgiveness, and especially with the lockdown, because we're kind of all there's no more running away from our problems. We're all on lockdown together under one roof. So if people are kind of feeling that, and they just want to kind of end Ramadan feeling a bit more peace, feeling that maybe things have been amended a little bit, wrongs made right, what kind of advice would you give in terms of baby steps for them?
Okay, let me take it in two stages, this question, because as you know yourself, and me and Yasmin have been discussing this a lot recently, actually, is so many reports coming out on the level of problems and abuse and sort of like breakups within just this pandemic period of being in lockdown, because people have actually, it's like they, like you rightly said, there's nowhere to go now. They actually have to deal with their families, they have to deal with each other.
Yeah.
And a lot of that escapism now, the roots have been snipped. So what are they going to do? And so what's ended up happening is that there's been, I mean, I had a spike in people calling me, asking me to help because there's been divorce given, there's been separation happening, there's domestic abuse, and all of this within just the lockdown period. And that's just the limited stamp that's trickling through to me. But obviously the media are talking about it now, there's reports coming out. And so the thing that's happening is that these issues have been suppressed for so long in their marriages, and the family sort of like dynamic has been suppressed and put under the carpet. And now what's happened is it's come to the surface. And what's ended up happening is like, and this is the best way I can explain this, and then this is the first part, and then I'll give you the kind of solutions to it. The first part of this is, the best way I can explain it is, husbands and wives, what's ended up happening is they've been co-parenting. They've not been investing their times in their marriage. And this is a huge issue within our community, is that their life becomes about the children. And this, I want to, anything you take away from this entire session that we've had, take this away. We need to rebalance the Islamic paradigm regarding families. Families are not the nuclear family, like the central piece of a family are not the children. And I need to scream that out, because I had myself and my wife, we hear this all the time, that the children are not the center of your family. The center of the family should be the husband and the wife. They are the couple. They are the power team, the powerhouse. Just now, what ends up happening is a lot of people, their children have become the center of their lives. And what that means is the wife or the mother ends up doing tawaf round the children. And then the mother will take the husband, and then they start doing tawaf round the children. So they're eating, they're breathing, they're working, everything is for the children. And that's it. And what ends up happening is, and I've heard so many times, and this is not even funny anymore, so many times I've heard that the wife is sleeping in another room and the husband in another room, and this wife is sleeping with the children, or the husband. It's like, it's so insane that so much oppression of the rights have been taken away. There's so much injustice of rights not being given in its due proportion. And so what ends up happening is, people then, after years like this, end up, everything is just about the children. The intimacy falls away. The investing in time with your family, going out, and the husband and wife going out on dates together, flirting with each other, giving each other surprise gifts, actually like having time outs just for themselves, and going away and actually making a concrete effort to say, okay, we're investing in this, getting their friends or the neighbours or people they trust, saying, here's a couple $100, look after the children, or to their grandparents or to their family, saying, look after the children for a couple of weeks, a couple of days, or long weekend. Me and a hubby are going away to actually just have time with ourselves. None of that stuff is happening. No sort of like understanding each other's dynamics, what your wants are, what your needs are, and then the intimacy part doesn't even exist. You understand? Like this once every 6 months, it's like that's insanity. You understand? And people are living like this for years. And then what's happened now with this pandemic is people have realised that they actually have no relationship. And this is a sad thing, is that I deal with people just now in their 50s, and I've had couples in their 50s and even their early 60s. Their children have moved out, they're married, they're away, and both husband and wife are left together, and they're like, we don't even know each other. Like, all our lives have been about the children, and now then the grandchildren, and then this and that. We don't even know. We're actually we're strangers to each other, and that breaks my heart. I actually once broke down in a call, because I just found it so powerful. Like, after living like 30, 40, 50 years together, and then finally they're on a call to someone like me who's like trying to listen to this, and then they're saying, we don't even know each other. And the husband crying and the wife crying and saying, like, everything was for the children. And they've invested nothing in themselves, in their actual marriage. And how, I mean, you know the Quranic quote off by heart, probably, regarding how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that your spouses are like a garment for each other, in protection and covering, but none of that's there. None of that mahabba, that zeal, that passion, everything is about the children. So people are not investing in their marriages, and there's other reasons, but this is just one of the reasons that these things are happening now. They've realised they don't even know how to get on together. They don't even understand each other's dynamics. They don't even understand each other's love languages. Like, they don't understand that their wife's love languages, touch or was it words of affirmation, and she doesn't, and the wife doesn't realise, like, that the husband's need is touch, for instance. Like, that's his love language. So they're missing each other's signals. They're not even doing any bits of connection. Like, a wife would be doing a bit of connection towards a husband, trying to do a connection with them, and he just turns around. He's oblivious because he lacks this understanding, and vice versa. A husband will be trying to do something, and the wife misses the bit of connection. Why? Because there is no relationship. Everything is geared towards everyone else apart from them. So the solution to this, which is not a quick fix, but one of the solutions of this is actually something that I advise a lot of my clients in this situation, is to actually sit down and actually re-spark that what you had in the initial courting stage, or the courting stage, when I say courting stage, just after marriage. I don't want to, what I mean is, like, that feeling of, like, so, like, in the initial stages of marriage, when it was just like everything was carefree, you lived and breathed for that person, which is an extreme, but you know what I mean, but just like, you were in love, you were head over heels for that person. And I actually train people through CBT, through NLP, through relationship science, and through the things I've learned from Gottman Institute and from other institutes, is how to rekindle, reconnect, to allow you to be able to manifest and basically reconnect with that spark that you had in the beginning. And once you re-engage that spark, I know couples now, like, seriously, like, I had one, like, a couple from Canada say to me just recently, they were like, Qasim, guess what? We went on our first date, like, after, like, 10 years, and we had a ball, and, like, we did this, and, like, we acted like when we first met, and, like, really, they were, like, so excited. And the main thing is that along with that comes the passion, then along with that comes the words, along with that comes the gift, and along with that, which is very important, comes the intimacy, which is a very important part of all of this. And so once these dynamics are healthy, and you've got a system in place for loving and flourishing with your wife or your husband, and realizing that you are the core, that not at every becketh and call do you have to do dua for your children. No, the children should know the central pinnacle of our home is mum and dad. Do you understand? And that's tarbiyah as well. And once the kids see that dynamic, guess what? Guess what happens when you see that dynamic? The children start to grow and learn healthy habits of how to love and have relationships with their partners. And the other thing that I would say to do this, I recommend people to do something where they communicate. So they're doing all this stuff where they communicate, actually discuss in depth something that we call in the relationship science field, building a love map, and asking a lot of open-ended questions. And what that basically is a love map is an integral, very deep understanding of your partner. So, like, I'll give you an example. Like, I have actually some questions I ask a lot of my clients here. I give them examples. I'll give you an example of some love map questions. You ask them stuff like, what makes your partner feel most competent? Or what is your partner's favourite time of making love? What turns your partner on? What is your partner's favourite food? And then what is your partner's favourite way to spend an evening? And there's actually, like, these love map questions, like, they can go into the hundreds. The more, and this is something that's very deep, because I've dealt with couples that are on the verge of separation, to then eventually after 6 months understanding why their partner's thinking a certain way and why their reactions are to a certain way. And once they start to realise I actually know my wife's inner desires. I actually understand my wife's hopes and aspirations and dreams. And they build this love map of it. And then the wife does the same with the husband. They ask, and then going on to asking stuff like open-ended questions, like some examples are, if you could be the richest person in the world, what would you do with your money? If you could be a superstar in any sport, which sport would you choose and why? Who's been the most difficult person in your life, other than a partner or spouse, and why? These might seem trivial and like, what the heck's that all about? But the more you go into these sort of questionings of your life partner, the more you design a map, a detailed map of your spouse, the more you understand how and what works, and how to tread and how not to tread, and what actually works for the longevity and health of that marriage. And then you get to also understand the way I say it is the colour of her sky in her realm. You get to understand the colour, the way her outlook on life. A lot of couples don't even realise, and it's only through in-depth discussion that we realise that there's been trauma in the childhood, that a spouse has been traumatised through different things, through bullying or through some sort of abuse, because they've had a relative abuse them, and they find out all these things, and then the partner's sitting there in tears. So there's a plethora of things, and like I was saying, there's techniques where you can actually sit down and start building love maps. I think it's very important for couples, especially during this lockdown situation, to be open, honest and sincere with each other. And remember, a lot of folks think that, a lot of people are going to be really, really like taken aback by what I'm about to say, but a lot of folks think that I'm here in my capacity, and other relationship specialists and therapists and coaches and psychotherapists and licensed therapists, we're all here to sort of like bring you all back together, and it's all sort of like like happy days. It's not like that. If we can, great. Alhamdulillah, all good is from Allah. But the reality is, I'm also here to sometimes tell people, like, you need to divorce, you need to separate, you need to leave, you need to part. And that is also ihsan, excellence, because you need to just be real with your relationships and with your situations. If you're in a predicament just now where you can actually sit, converse, get outside help, then eventually go to couples coaching or individual coaching or therapy, whatever it is that you need, and you can like do marital coaching, and you can take things to this next level, and you guys can eventually flourish. Fantastic. But if the reality is that you can't get to that position, then like I said, the flourishing part is with the tools and everything that we've recommended. But if you can't flourish and you know that your marriage is toxic or that your situation is toxic, I'm also here, and others are here to say, it's time to put up the boxing gloves and part amicably. Because what's happening is now, if you don't part amicably, you're going to end up damaging yourselves beyond a certain point. But I mean, people get to a point where they damage themselves beyond repair. And I've seen cases when it comes to physical health. I've seen people who have said that because of my dynamic in my relationship, I have now walked away with severe high blood pressure, diabetes, this and that. Like, people are actually saying it's because of the amount of cortisol and stress that's been released in their blood system over the span of 10, 15, 20 years. It's actually made them physically sick and age rapidly, and have anxiety, depression, etc. So, but people hang on, they cling on for everything. Why? For the sake of the kids, or for the sake of this, for the sake of what people are going to think. But the reality is, like, being mature adults, being amicable and controlling your egos and controlling this cultural baggage that we have. Take things back to the Quran and Sunnah. Take things back and realize, like, if you're beyond a certain point, and if there's no hope, then discuss it in a loving, amicable way and part with barakah and goodness. Don't part with evil intentions. And I know it's easier said than done, but trust me, there is, especially if you have children involved, It's better to have the hard discussion and not live through an abusive situation where the children see abusive parents and all of this, because what ends up happening is, this is not me saying this, by the way, this is a plethora of serious reports and studies into this, that children get more damaged living in a toxic, abusive home with parents that are together than when they're apart. So this is something that's at your discretion. Every household knows their situation better than I. And the other thing is, so this is where there's two segments. There's one where there's like, it's got to a point where there's just, it's too toxic now. And there's no compatibility. There's nothing left. There's that. And then it's the parts I explained earlier where you actually have a loving relationship. You love each other. You love your children. You have a wonderful family, but you just need tweaking, and you need to realign and rekindle some of the things from the past, and to be able to realign your understanding of each other. Because remember, everyone grows. If people are married a decade before, a decade is a long time. You're going to change, you're going to mature, you're going to have life experiences, educate yourself to a new way, you're going to adapt and mold and change. You have to be able to understand that month in, month out, like a year down the road. You need to be able to understand each other and grow together. Because otherwise, what's going to happen is that one is going to be like this and one is going to be going like that. And this is where a lot of the problems come up. Is like there's no more understanding, there's no more communication, and they're just living for the sake of living. Like I said, just co-parenting. And so, like I said, there's lots of little tweaks that you can do outside therapy. And coaching. There's lots of little tweaks. One of them I highly suggest is the love mapping, and asking a lot of open-ended questions and sitting together as a husband and wife, as a power couple, and sitting back, having your chai, having your coffee, getting your Scottish shortbread out, and sitting back and actually just saying, you know something, I want you to know something, that I'm deeply appreciative of who you are as my wife, and I'm deeply appreciative of you as who you are as my husband, and I respect you, and I am in love with you, but I'm really sorry that we've lost our way over the last year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Let's try to figure this out together, and like sit together, hold hands, drink your chai, get a piece of paper out, start asking serious questions about who are you now? Like, it's been 15 years. Like, who are you? Like, what do you love? What are your aspirations? Have you got any dreams that are left that have not been done yet? How can I help you as your husband in fulfilling them dreams? Or a wife will say, look, I know that you've done so much for us. You're such a good man, mashallah. You worked so hard over the years to provide for me, to provide for my kids, for our kids. You've done everything in your best, but it's just, unfortunately, we're not that couple that we were. But you're a good man. How can I help you be able to become like more in tune to me? Or how can I help you? Have you got any dreams that are left? Have you got anything that's deep down that you want to fulfill? Now, because of all of this that we are doing to provide and do for our family, is there anything left that I can do for you that we can work on together? And a lot of the times you'll be surprised especially the men, what they come out with. There'll be things that actually a lot of like the couples, like they get, especially the wives, they get floored when eventually the husband feels safe and secure and he's open and being vulnerable. The things that he says, it's like the wife will be like, I never even knew that. I never even realized that that's what we wanted, or that's what we needed. And that's what I'm saying. It's about understanding making an intricate map of each other. And then from there on, communicating, really putting a spark back into your marriage and actually putting things aside and saying, do you know something? We're going on a date, or we're going on this holiday together, and it's just us, it's just you and me. That's it, it's just you and me. And like focusing on that and focusing on rekindling and putting that spark back into the marriage. These are the things that you guys can do outside just sort of like premarital couples coaching, relationship coaching, and then obviously if it's more serious because there's other hidden underlying issues. Like I had a couple that the wife was actually sexually abused by an uncle for a long time, and because of that she found it really difficult to be intimate with her husband, And so many, like it took a long time for them to understand, because she had buried it way in, and she never realised that's one of the reasons that she wasn't wanting to be intimate. And so that took a huge toll on their marriage. But then eventually she got individual therapy with a psychotherapist, and then she got to the root of her issues, and I got to spend a lot of time with the husband, but that situation still turned out to be a parting of ways. But still, it wasn't in a way that was, because there was too much time had elapsed. There was too much sort of like baggage. So the thing now is like, at least they understood and they parted amicably, and that's the most beautiful part. Is if you can't be together amicably, at least they parted amicably, and the children see that, and the children see, wow, mum is happy and papa's happy. Do you understand? Like they're both happy, and they're living their own lives, and there's no alienation, there's no toxic brainwashing of the children towards each other. And that for me is like a win-win situation when you have to part. And that's something that you'll know yourself, being a Mashra Quran specialist, is it's exactly what Allah says in the Quran.
SubhanAllah, yeah, definitely.
It's exactly what Allah says in the Quran. He said, part with ihsan.
But yeah, I think that was absolutely a great advice for everyone. And I think, alhamdulillah, the session, although it's been maybe a little bit longer than intended, I think it was full of a lot of practical tips, inshallah, full of a lot of wisdom. Jazakallah khairan for sharing all of that with us. Just so before we end, inshallah, can you just tell Quran Rehab followers where they can follow you, where they can find information about you and the services, your books, because I think they can really benefit from that, inshallah.
Excellent. Well, look, the most simplest thing I can say is just jump onto my website. It's just my first and second name, so it's QasimRafiq.com. And everything that you need is on there, from the books to the information to all the courses to all the coaching packages, the price, everything is there. And folks who are on Instagram can hit me up on Instagram on Qasim Rafiq. I think it's Qasim_Rafiq_Scottish. I am very proud of my Scottish roots. And I get again on Facebook as well. So, but again, all the links to my social media are on that website as well. So again, it's QasimRafiq.com.